the Christmas stuff up for a month. Yeah. I know.
Sure, their microphones are turned on. Not so much for those of us in attendance, but for those that are joining remotely and also for the minute taker. She takes the minutes based on the transcript. And if she can't hear us, it's really hard to take those minutes. So thank you for that. Sammy, if you have any difficulty hearing us at all, please let us know. And Sammy, I'm going to ask you to do roll call.
Right, we have Counselor Fox and Counselor Blaine are absent. Counselor Engelbretson.
Here.
Counselor Lehman. Counselor Wells.
Here.
Counselor Smith.
Here.
And Mayor Bell.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Thank you. I'm going to move this around. Sammy nicely makes me a script that keeps me on track most of the time. I do want to, in my mayor's comments, tell you that Counselor Blaine has indicated that he would like to resign his council position, which means that we will have an opening and we will be recruiting for that. So as most of you have noticed, he has been unable to fulfill his commitments to council, and we miss him when he's gone, but he has really taken restock of his life and said at this point he is just too busy, and with young children and a full-time job, I think we can probably all understand that. So I'll just put that out there under mayor's comments. I will also remind you under mayor's comments that we are in the process of recruiting for the transportation ad hoc committee. And as our ordinance says, the mayor will serve on that, but also one other council member. So I'm asking if any of you present tonight have interest of serving on that committee. It is a fairly narrow scope. It will be a 6-month commitment. I would expect that we would meet monthly. Time to be determined because that will depend on what those people that are going to be on like to do. I know we have had at least one applicant from the community. I would hope that we would have 4. And certainly if there are more of you that would like to participate, you could certainly participate as a community member. So, Councilor Lehman. Oh, you would ask me that. A planning commission and council president. Yes, thank you. And I was thinking there was one other maybe, but I think I'm wrong on that. I think it was just council president and planning commission. Any other questions? And then we do also have by bylaws, we do have an opening on the finance audit committee for a community member. And so I believe we have 1 applicant for that, perhaps more at this point. So those are the big things. I would also, if you haven't walked down in Norma Pfeiffer Park, walk down the trail and looked at what's happening with the Veterans Memorial. It's really quite exciting. And walked down there today. Little edging is going in and they were working really hard to keep that all level and hoping that things didn't fall over. And some brick edging in there. So that will be really exciting. I can't wait. And I know that the Parks and Tree Committee will be doing a lot of implementing, and this is all being done in-house. So Parks and Tree, right now, the bulk of the work is from Public Works, and we certainly appreciate that and added on to their normal duties and street sweeping and all of those other wonderful things that they're doing. So are there any counselors that are interested in serving on the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee?
I might be interested, but my problem is my time commitment, so.
When's it likely to start?
In January, not till January, and then it would be, the way we've set it up by our ordinance is it would be a resolution. It's not an ordinance, it is a resolution. It is a 6-month commitment. If it goes beyond that, it would have to come back to council. And it's fairly well defined in terms of what we'll be doing.
Can you split duty? I mean.
What do you,
You could do someone and then have an alternate, or something like that.
I can't do either for a couple of months.
Counselor Lehman? And certainly, I think, if we can juggle around, and if a couple of you would like to apply as community members and split a position, I think that would certainly be reasonable. Because I think it's important, each of us that serve on council come from a little bit different area of the city and have some different perspectives. And I think that would be great. And also, if you have neighbors or friends that are interested in traffic in Coburg and participating in that, I would encourage you to talk to them and see. It is closing on the 17th. Yep. So
Yes.
coming up
I
quick.
only have one person so far.
Two,
Who,
Oh,
which is, so we have mayor, council, planning commission, and then 2 applicants, and it's 5 to 7, right?
Right, it's a
Okay.
minimum 2 to get it going, and then we were hoping for
we're hoping
4.
for 4.
And I've had a couple conversations, email with some people who were interested, same problem of timing about when the meetings would be, and kind of trying to say it's likely gonna be late afternoon, evening kind of stuff, but we don't really know. Somebody who's gonna be gone in January, so there's a lot of people that are kind of interested, but are trying to juggle everything, so we'll see what we end up with. The deadline is for the citizen piece, you all could make your formal decision, in the December meeting. You're not subject as the council appointments to the 17th, but
Counselor Lehman has indicated.
can you have the citizens open fulfill?
yeah, we can do that. Just in case, we put a due date, just in case we get an onslaught of people wanting to.
We haven't, but we've had 2, and I think that's really good. Counselor
I was just gonna mention, since the topic of people feeling that their time pressure has come up multiple times, we might just try to allow for those meetings to be, I hate to say this for you, because I think it adds more work for you, Sammy, but more of a hybrid meeting where people could come in person or attend virtually, because I've noticed if a meeting is available to attend virtually, that works a lot better for a busy schedule, because you can just log in from where you're at instead of having to travel.
Kathy, all public meetings have
No.
to be now
Oh, okay.
legally.
Oh, I didn't know
Yes,
that.
you
In-
have to
in
have,
Oregon?
yes,
Oh,
it's state law.
Not know that. Well, there we go.
just learn things all the time in here. Okay, so I think so Counselor Lehman has indicated his interest. I would entertain a motion at this point.
To approve
approve Counselor Lehman as the ad hoc committee member for the city council.
I'll second it. And second by Counselor Smith. Oh, that was a motion by Counselor Wells and a second by Counselor Smith to appoint Counselor Lehman to serve as the council representative to the Transportation Safety Ad hoc Committee. Any discussion? Probably already done that. Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Motion carries. You won. So that would be, by our quorum, that is 4 in favor and 0 opposed. Thank you very much. That, you are now it. We appreciate your service. Sammy, are there any proposed changes to tonight's agenda?
There are not any changes or additions to the agenda, and we do not have anybody signed up to speak under citizen testimony, Mayor.
Very much. It's my next question and you beat me to it. So the consent agenda, counselors may remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion by requesting such action prior to consideration. So we have the minutes from September 26th, City Council and Planning Commission work session, the minutes from October 10th, 2023 City Council. And then we also have the OLCC liquor license application for Coburg Distilling Company LLC. Are there any council members who wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? None? I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
That was a motion by Counselor Engebretson and a second by Counselor Lehman. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not. So the motion passes 4-0. We do have a special guest tonight. I finally found her on my script and I knew she was here. So Megan Dompey is here with us. Megan is the director of Coburg Main Street and we're happy that you're here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Is this, yeah, this is on. Okay. So yeah, as she said, I am Megan Dompey. I'm the executive director of Coburg Main Street. I just wanted to come and talk to you guys. We have not been in here to speak to you all since Tracy decided to leave and resign. Excuse me, Tracy Pugh decided to resign as director. And a lot of things have changed since then. So I thought an update was kind of necessary. And thank you so much for having me. The big piece, obviously, is that we are no longer under the umbrella of the city. Many meetings and lots of conversation with both the previous administrator Ann Heath, as well as your new administrator Adam, have taken place since Tracy's departure. While ultimately Main Street decided to go independent, both the city administrators as well as Coburg Main Street Board collectively came to the conclusion that there is more that Main Street can accomplish as a private 501c3 working alongside the city than we could ever do being part of city government. It just works out better that way. Our plans to aid the city for the betterment of the Coburg community, of course, has not changed. The relationship between Coburg Main Street and the city is extremely strong. You guys know I'm in here like a couple times a week. The day that city administrator Ann Heath retired, she actually wrote me a beautiful letter about her hopes for Coburg Main Street and gave me a lot of advice that I absolutely need. But she chose to close that letter with "Now go fly," which I thought was very sweet. And it was also really reminiscent of something that my dad actually said to me when I went away to college, which is kind of actually fitting for the situation because in some ways that was kind of what this departure was. You guys gave us our wings and now we've decided to go and fly. You all helped create the program. And now that we're established, it's more beneficial for us to work alongside of you than underneath you. Now we're gonna define kind of what that relationship is gonna look like, and Adam has been spearheading that, and I thank you so much for that. We're in the process of ironing out in black and white what Coburg Main Street will be doing to maintain the relationship with the city, sorting out what needs the city has and the needs that we have, and figuring out what we can feasibly take on and how we can work together. Line items have been made and lots of conversation back and forth has happened. We believe, and Adam believes, that we're kind of almost there. Very shortly, the contract will be brought to city council. It will be a living document that changes as the needs for both organizations will obviously change over time. What we know for sure right now is Coburg Main Street will continue to execute community events, bring public art to the community, support local business, and continue our efforts to restore and honor the rich history of Coburg. We have plans for adding more programming in 2024, reestablishing our community meetings, and our subcommittees have gone from 1 to 3 in the last month, actually doubling our volunteer base. With every step forward, our organization will continue to grow and bring more enrichment to Coburg. But no matter how much we grow, within that growth, we're dedicated to nurturing the relationship between Main Street and the city. And together, we will continue to better the Coburg community. So that's what I have to say. Thank you guys so much for having me and letting me speak. You guys know where to find me. Please let me know if you have any questions or any further ideas.
Dr. Lehman.
Remind us what your funding streams are, changing because of the.
So right now our funding streams are going to be, that's actually going to be discussed within the contract. But on top of what we're going to be getting from the city for the pieces that we'll be doing for the city, we're actually pretty successful in funding some of our events this year. Getting funding for those events like the Antique Fair and the run we just had was really successful. So a lot of fundraising is actually funding for Main Street is coming from the events that we've taken over. Yeah. Does anybody?
Counselor Smith.
I think it would be helpful to let council know what you have in place for funding that's pretty solid right now over and above the city, because you've done a lot of work.
Yes, I have.
Establishing a pretty solid.
Yes.
Funding base.
And we, you know, for me too, just as who I am, it's my personality, is that oftentimes I try to look for things that are, you know, kill two birds with one stone. One of the things we've done is put in some pretty inexpensive sponsorship opportunities for local businesses. We didn't want to make that sponsorship piece so high that we couldn't include kind of new businesses, startups, smaller businesses, farms, things like that. Maybe they don't have a lot of money for advertising. But in doing so, we've actually created quite a few sponsorships within it because it's so affordable. So that's been helpful. We also offer, this is aside from the funding, but we offer scholarships, not scholarships, sponsorships in exchange for volunteer hours. So that's something else that we just started doing in the last 4 or 5 months, and that's been pretty great too. And then on top of it, we are also getting in for our markets. We have vendor fees. When we have food trucks out there, we charge, that kind of a thing. So yeah, and then we're always going after grants, but you never know with grants.
Everybody's always going after.
Exactly. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Well, I would like to personally say, Megan, that I have been so impressed with
Thank you.
your energy and your ideas and your enthusiasm. It's
Thank
just
you.
been great working
Thank you.
with you, and you know, I was so impressed with our whole fall festival.
Good.
And that was lots of fun. I saw the runners go by. I didn't run because I had a birthday party that day. I have a good excuse. But everybody looked like they were having just a wonderful time. The route was well laid out. It was
good.
well marked. I didn't see anybody lost anywhere. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Very, very happy.
I appreciate that.
And look forward to working with you and hearing more
Okay.
about what Main Street's up to.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Dompey before we let her just sit down and drink her water? All right, thank you. Okay, so we have, a minute, I have to get back here, and I think I've turned too many pages. Okay, our next item of business is our ordinances and resolutions. So, Mr. Hanks?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We've got the first action item for you tonight is a resolution declaring surplus property and authorizing its disposal. There's a small staff report, and behind that, the draft resolution, both containing the table that includes kind of the information about the vehicles, and some of them are equipment, not vehicles. There are really a variety of obsolete and just under or non-utilized pieces of equipment that both primarily the police department and Public Works went through their stocks and kind of were even a realistic assessments of its value relative to their cost for maintenance, or some of them are in a semi-inoperable state right now, and the cost of fixing them versus what they'd be, their utility and value after fixing. So making that assessment that these vehicles really don't work for us operationally or financially any longer. Our purchasing ordinance prescribes the methods for disposal of assets, and that's referenced here in the staff report as well. And the intention is to utilize online government auction, pretty common now, to very streamlined, very kind of efficient from a staff perspective, and really cast a wide net for sometimes pretty unique and oddball equipment that isn't really a general public sort of a thing, many of them. So with council's approval, we will, a declaration of surplus and authorization for me to execute their disposal through the online auction. We'll start that process. We expect somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 in revenue. It really depends, and that can be over time. Some might go off the books really quick, some might take a while. As I mentioned, any revenue, the proceeds would go back to their home department or home fund, if that's known. Some of them are so old that it's not really known what fund they were originally purchased from. So if we can't make any really easy logical connections, they'll be placed as revenue in the general fund.
Thank you for that. I will entertain a motion. Point.
I move to adopt resolution 2023-17, a resolution declaring described vehicles and equipment as surplus property, and authorizing city administrator as the solicitation agent to dispose of the property consistent with ordinance A-91-C.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Counselor Wells and a second by Counselor Engebretson to adopt resolution 2023-17, a resolution declaring described vehicles and equipment as surplus property and authorizing the city administrator as the solicitations agent to dispose of the property consistent with ordinance A-91-C. Is there any council discussion? I just have one comment. In looking at this, so many of these have quite a few miles on them, and yet I look back at the date that some of them were purchased, and I think that we as council need to sort of weigh when is the right time to buy a new piece of equipment as opposed to buying a used piece of equipment, and that's a budgetary, certainly have been limited and will continue to be limited by budgetary constraints. But I think, you know, much as we do in our personal lives, we have to sort of think about those things as we go through. And I certainly applaud our police department and public works for keeping things going and utilizing equipment that we have in the very best way possible. Any other discussion other than the mayor's comments? Hearing none, I will ask that all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Want to go on to the next resolution, Mr. Hanks?
Yes, we'll go on to second action item is a resolution adopting by reference, the 2023 to 2028 Lane County Multi-Jurisdictional Natural Hazards Mitigation Plan. Burke Hansen is gonna hang out here with us, and I'll give a brief overview. And Burke is, in addition to being our Public Works Supervisor, is also our Emergency Management Coordinator. So he goes to these regional meetings. He coordinates, you know, directly with me on a variety of emergency management topics, funding opportunities, requirements, all of these things. And so Burke has been tracking and working on this one all the way through. The interesting point to me, and that Burke and I both have been talking about, is this matrix. And we included both the county matrix overall matrix from Lane County, and that's the smaller print, and then below that is the larger print of ours. And this matrix is really how the industry, the hazards industry, goes about determining what's the highest likelihood and utilizing that entire matrix. I just thought it was interesting to look at the comparison. What are our top three versus the county's top three? They're similar, but not quite the same, just by scope and geography and all those things. It's emergency, management is kind of a little different based on who lives where and what resources and infrastructure are where. So just an interesting tidbit, but this really provides us with one of its primary objectives. Lane County does the heavy lifting, but one of the primary objectives and benefits for us is it makes us eligible for some grants that if we were not part of this Lane County mitigation plan, we would not even be eligible to attempt to apply. So anything else, Burke, that I missed?
I think you touched on everything that we need to.
I had the privilege of sitting in on one meeting with Burke and the person from the county that we're working on this, and it was extremely informative. I mean, I'm thinking, well, no, we're at greater risk for X, Y, and Z, but talking it through, this is how we came up with what are the risks for Coburg specifically, as opposed, as Mr. Hanks says, as opposed to Lane County being a huge county with very diverse geographical terrain. So it was very interesting. I found it highly enlightening. Any other questions of Mr. Hansen?
Does the weight factor affect funding? I mean, is it prioritized by how, does that affect what?
No,
you
I don't
apply for?
believe so. I don't know if that plays into that.
If it does, it's somewhat indirect. It's not
Yeah.
primary. I think we can apply for things that aren't our number one. In fact, I think that's what Burke and I and the whole team have been talking about. Probably are the one that we, probably have our eyes on the most. Really is related to earthquake, and that would be our water reservoir, or our supply or storage, and that that doesn't really hit items 1 and 2 as much as it hits item 3. But it may have some, if we're down to the wire with some other applicants, maybe that breaks the tie. I'm not totally sure on that.
Yeah,
but-
I'm sure that there's, just like everything that FEMA and all them do, there's matrices out there. I'm sure they calculate all that in, and it's kind of looked at that way. I'm sure as it gets down, like you said, I think I agree, as it gets down to the who needs it more, I'm sure there's some wave factors that way.
Sure.
So,
Because just looking at wildfire being the very last, I mean, when you look at Coburg,
Mhm.
and we may not have a forest fire, but I know that one of my concerns was when the fire was in the Coburg Hills, if that wind comes, we have a whole lot of treetops that could,
mhm. Yeah, and a lot of that concern, during that event, a lot of the discussion with that was, it's actually rather interesting where it was actually in Lynn County. A lot of Lane counties,
but
they weren't worried about it yet. They had to
Yeah.
cross the county line and then it was gonna become that. Luckily, Coburg's situated in a really unique, situation where you have the freeway, that helps block that and you have a lot of farmers fields and, I grew up in a farming community and a lot of the times what happens is you'll be amazed how fast farmers will get discs out there
Right.
and start creating some fire lines that you can see that up there actually even on the hill where they took some wherever they could get tractors up, they started disking to get some good fire lines established, so that
Yeah.
helps a lot.
Coming from Southern Oregon, of course, when that fire happened, I think the first week I got here, 5 miles, in Southern Oregon, a fire 5 miles away is imminent evacuation. 5 to 7 miles here is a different story. So that's really kind of showing the matrix and, like it or not, what they also include is population, who is impacted, what volume, of people are impacted. So that's one of the factors. And if it's a sparsely populated area, from the matrix perspective, that kind of lowers its ranking a little bit. They're looking at applying resources where the most people are going to be the most vulnerable.
Layman.
Somewhat related to this, you touched on it, it'd be nice to have an update. Well,
Perfect. Teaser for the work session. Yeah, we will be doing that on the November 28th. We will definitely be giving, it's a full water system update. And we will be sure that we hit both of those topics.
Well, I noticed in the Coburg's hazard qualification that tsunami didn't even make the cut, I guess. I don't know if that was an oversight or if it's included in like flood, risk.
I think that would be included in flood, and I also don't know, I'd have to look back on ours. I don't even know if tsunami's in our annex. It's in the counties because they cover the Florence area.
Yeah,
and
I
things like
think
that,
there's a
so that's what it
distance
is.
from coast where that drops off as being, and it reverts to being some of the other things that, that are
Okay.
associated with it, but
Yeah, between that and earthquake.
Yeah.
I think is where you start to see that.
right.
But I unrelated and probably not worth talking about, but I seem to have watched a special on public television about how we here in the Willamette Valley need to protect ourselves from tsunamis, probably, because what it does is it can affect the electrical system. And if the electrical system goes out, the pumps go out and you can't get water. And so they always say recommend keeping 5 gallons of water in your garage or whatever. It's probably covered under flood and all, but just interesting that didn't make the list.
Okay.
I guess we can be
Yeah,
directed
I would
by
think
that.
that's
Right.
probably,
It would-
yeah.
For the wave to come.
Oh,
over
yeah,
the
that
coast
would,
right
Yeah.
not gonna happen.
That would be really pretty unusual.
Although they have
but-
found shell
Right.
remnants, in Corvallis,
Well, that's because the sea level used to be much higher.
Oh, you think that's what it?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
I could go into a whole thing.
No.
The geography.
Are you there?
Yes, yes,
Sure.
yes.
Councilor
So-
Wells, the electrical grid issue is, it touches on almost all of, many of these, and you're right, it's a critical one, and nationally, if you read articles, the grid is pretty fragile. The American grid, the US grid is really a shoestring together, but
And I think there is some speculation, Alan, that Counselor Wells, that perhaps, if there were to be a tsunami event at the coast, it could still cause severe flooding up the rivers. So I don't know that it hopefully wouldn't come this far up the river, but, there is inland flooding concern that I think it is correct to be concerned about, even though we're
probably, yeah.
not, maybe wouldn't get hit by a wave.
Yeah.
Probably not.
No.
At that point, You can just throw all this out and start over.
And we, we would be, as a region, housing people, it would be, that would be part of the indirect thing. So it's, it's not our event, but we are part of the network that would be assisting, that event, because it's not, Florence is not very far. It's an interesting, the U of O, group does this for many, many jurisdictions and counties in the state, and they're fascinating. This is a really interesting topic, because you think little bits and pieces, and then you talk to the experts, and they straighten you out. They straighten you out quick.
There would be certainly a ripple effect
Yeah.
if we have a tsunami, the earthquake triggering the tsunami, it would impact all of us, for sure. Whether or not that we get the wave, we would get
You said ripple effect.
a ripple effect. I know one, or maybe a small one. Okay. I will entertain a motion to accept the resolution.
To adopt resolution 23-18, resolution adopted by reference. 23- Lake County multi-jurisdictional natural hazard version 4.
Is there a second? A second. And it's a second by Counselor Smith. So there's a motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor Smith to adopt resolution 2023-18, a resolution adopting by reference the 2023-28 Lane County multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. Is there any further discussion? None? I'll accept a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Council action items. We have Coburg Loop Path funding. And will be a report from Mr. Hanks.
Yeah, I will start this one off, and Brian Harmon, our Public Works Director, will assist and support, because this is a project that predates me. The item in front of you, the reason this item is in front of council tonight is that the project had been funded by some MPO funds that had a 10.27%. It's a weird calculation about why the match was a little over 10%. As time went by and as looking at the project, as the engineering got closer, the project costs rose, which exceeded the funding that was provided. So an alternate plan was developed to utilize more of the path out in the existing roadway on Industrial, which would stay within the budget. So that was on the path towards being the solution to the funding deficit. And in the meantime, additional funding was provided to bring the project back up to its new full estimated construction installation cost, which is excellent. It means that the project can go back to its original design. And on top of that, there's a desire for the project to happen in the summer of 24 rather than 2025. The only kind of not so awesome part of that news is the match goes with that. So 10.27% of the additional funds that were not city funds, that were MPO funds and STIP funds, require then that we chip in a little bit more, which ends up being $25,880.40. So the request in front of council today is or the choice for council is to allocate, to authorize an allocation of existing appropriation of within the street fund of $25,880 towards this project. As I noted in the staff report, that may or may not require us to come back to you at some point to ask that that be taken out of contingency. The timing of other capital projects in the street fund may end up being such that that isn't necessary, but we'll be monitoring that and letting you know regardless of how all of our projects are tracking. Timing of all of those is always the moving target, and Brian and I think it's fairly likely that we would not need to come back and have a supplemental budget to request you authorize contingency, but it is an option should everything go perfectly and we spend and the projects are all on time and on budget. We may need to dip into contingency. That's why I wanted to make sure to include that that item for you, but we don't think we will. But when we'll know that in a spring, and it can come back. We most likely will be coming with, generally with a supplemental budget of some sort to make adjustments that we see mostly on the capital side across all funds. But the item today, and if you choose not to allocate that additional, we would be in a position of letting the regional transportation folks know that we don't want that extra 252. Let's just do that alternate project that is within the original pricing.
So, point of clarification, so it's not just the bike path, it's also the resurfacing, rehabbing of Industrial Way, is that correct?
Yeah, thanks, go ahead. Yeah, you're right, it's a combo project.
Yeah, it portions of that, yeah, so I think Adam kind of spelled it out perfectly that I think that they could see that the need was there for more funding after. I know we've probably talked about this at great lengths in other meetings in the past, but they saw the need for more funding. They allocated that funding, and now it's, do we want to spend that extra $25,000 to put the path back off of that shoulder up into the lawn area? We think that that's probably the most prudent thing to do for safety purposes. It wasn't the alternate location of the path wasn't the most ideal place, but it was going to be installed with safety in mind. But this is probably the safest route for sure.
Actually get it off of the highway
Correct.
and have a dedicated path.
That's
rather
correct.
than, if I recall correctly, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, when we didn't think we had enough money to do it, the path would be off the roadway part of the way,
Mm-hmm.
and then on the roadway with some barrier
That's
separating
correct.
us
Yep.
from traffic
Mhm.
and painted green or something. We see
Mhm.
these in downtown Eugene,
Yep.
where the bike lane sort of rolls in and out. And that
So the-
was our alternative.
Yep. So this keeps it kind of matching what's existing on both ends, right? The north and the south, right? So it'll come off of by Serenity Lane, make a corner, cross the driveway in the lawn, go across that lawn area at Coburg North, the industrial park, and then it'll tie back into the existing, which is dedicated to the city now. So that, what is that, 8 foot, 6 foot path?
I think it's 8.
8 foot
Yeah.
path.
Mhm.
So that's what we'll see is just a mirror of that existing path. Yes, sir.
Okay. And it will continue on to the wetland park, right?
So,
So
yeah, so
Straight
great
on.
question. So when you get closer towards the north end of this project, we come up against some very high voltage transformers that cannot be relocated. So we do, even in the original project, we were gonna have to come out into the asphalt and go that last 400 feet on the shoulder.
front of the construction.
Yeah, so in
office.
front of Hamilton Construction.
Right.
Construction.
Which actually lines up pretty well to then getting right to the trailhead there
Right.
at Trails End. Yeah.
And of course, that end of Industrial North gets less traffic than.
Absolutely.
farther
Yep.
down. You're not
So-
seeing big trucks roaring by.
Yep, so the last user on that street is Hamilton. So it would just be a path in front of, the curb face there.
Marked by like.
Yep.
painted- Okay.
Yep, so there'll be a delineation of some sort, whether it's, white paint, maybe the thermoplastic white line so you can see it at night, that sort of thing. With, the bike markers, I think that's on the plans. Yes, ma'am.
Counselor Smith?
What businesses are there north of Serenity Lane that use industrial way? I know Hamilton's the last one. What are the businesses in
Oh,
between?
boy.
I mean, is there a lot?
There's a lot.
is
Yeah,
there a
yeah.
lot
So,
large traffic generated
yeah.
by those businesses?
yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. There is a lot. I couldn't name all of the businesses, but, Coburg North Industrial, Park is a condominiumized, business area. So there's several large companies in there with quite a few, some of them run 2 shifts. So, you have coming and going, pretty much all day long. So, yeah, and it's always, carry-on trailer is a big one because, their trailers come in and out on semis, Marathon Coach, Penske, Tech Equipment, I know I'm forgetting Pape.
There's significant traffic.
Yes, absolutely.
during
Yep.
that. Okay.
Yep.
That was the
Drive fast.
Well, and it is they drive fast because the speed limit is 40 miles an hour. Yeah. So getting that off of that shoulder is, for us, that's important.
One thing I don't think I did add in here, but it was in Brian's prior council staff report that I did include is the project is being managed by the city of Eugene, which is great for us from a capacity standpoint. That's all being handled as part of the grant. So, we're not responsible for the day-to-day, progress on it. We'll be doing, any inspections or anything that we need to be doing, but it's project managed by the city of Eugene. So, it allows us to have this one plow forward while we're plenty busy on a variety of our other projects.
Had one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that I thought that when we started this loop path, that a lot of the matches from the city came out of the SDCs. Is that correct?
I don't
It seemed like
recall.
we lost a lot of our SDCs for park improvements when the loop path plan.
Are you talking,
started, as
like
far
loop 1 or 2?
Probably.
Yeah,
back,
that's definitely before my time, but
We would have to do a little research, but I would think that this would actually come from transportation SDCs more so than parks
Okay, maybe
SDCs.
it was
Yeah,
transportation.
because this is part of this would be a pedestrian infrastructure. So it would be a portion of the project could be eligible. And I think I included that as a possibility if we do need a contingency, or we could look at transportation SDCs for a portion of it. That's something that Brian and I have been talking about, SDCs in general on the project side. We've talked a lot about how we're organizing that and getting more of or getting a plan or making sure I understand the existing plan for the utilization of those SDCs. But I don't know that parks SDCs would be eligible to use for this project.
Yeah, and I just remembered it might have been misinformation, but I know there was opinion just through parks from some people in the community that so much of the SDCs was going toward the loop trail path.
So Counselor Smith, I think is that, and I don't know that I'm thinking the same thing that you're thinking, but when Hatfield subdivision was put in, how we have built into every subdivision has to have a green space. So rather than the
Okay.
green space designated, the part of the path went in lieu of an actual open space.
Okay, that
So
makes
I
sense.
think
That might be it.
that's what I believe that's what you're thinking about.
And it probably wasn't 100% parks SDCs.
No,
It would have been a
not really be
percentage.
able to be 100. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Just clarification from the old rattling around.
Well, it is hard to kind of keep track of all of those different things, so. So we have three different alternatives, if I'm reading this correctly. Oh, Councilor Engelbrecht.
Sorry, yeah, I was just, was it in this one also where there was mention of like an in-kind land donation as part of?
That was part
this?
of the,
Yeah,
And
that counts as part of our overall match, so that reduces our out-of-pocket match by 47,000, and so 47,500, yeah.
and it's, I don't remember now from reading it, was the match in question, or if we go one way, we don't have that donation, or we weren't able to use the
No,
donation if we
no.
were gonna take the path onto the street or
so
something like
that donation was the existing path that's in place now.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so that would always stay in whichever way you decide, that portion stays in the project.
Either way, okay.
The difference would be whether we have a contiguous path, designated
That's
path,
correct.
or whether we have partial designated path with then pieces going out onto the pavement.
Correct.
And
Yep.
sort of blocked off and designated in a certain way. So the three alternatives are to go forward with both projects as initially designed, move forward to focus on the pavement preservation project with the bike ped option painted onto the pavement, or weaving back and forth, as I just said. And then the third option was, I'm not sure I've got the third option.
I think there was only two,
It's
wasn't it?
Oh, no, I have.
I guess the third option would be to do nothing at
Well,
all.
That's right. I think that's really the third option would be to do nothing, which we would leave a lot of money on the table because we couldn't use it anywhere else. So we just have to dump that back to them. Okay, I will entertain a motion. All are ready to do that.
I move to authorize the city administrator to commit additional $25,000 street funds from the FY 23-24 budgeted appropriations to the Coburg Route Path project to meet local match associated with the additional match recently allocated.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor Wells to authorize the city administrator to commit an additional $25,880.40 of street funds from the fiscal year 23-24 budgeted appropriations to the Coburg Loop Path project to meet the local match associated with the additional grant funds recently allocated to the project. For any further discussion? Hearing none, I will ask that all those in favor say aye.
I
Or any opposed? 0. So a motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Now we
Mayor.
have,
I just wanted to point out, you were not seeing things on the first summary. There's 2 alternatives, and then I turned the page and there's a second sort of summary, and there are 3. So,
thank you so much.
Oh, that was from the prior staff report. Yeah, yeah.
Probably losing it.
Yeah.
I just flew in, I'm a little jet lagged. I'm still on New Mexico time and not quite with the program. So it could be that I was seeing things too.
no,
So, thank you, Councilor Engelbrecht. And now we're going to talk about the Pavilion Park restroom purchase, and Mr. Hanks will help us with that.
Yeah, I'll give a little quick orientation, and then Brian again will fill in all the blanks. This item in front of you is as a result, I might back up and give a little context. With the Pavilion Park project, we have kind of run into some timing issues where we've decided that it's pretty much we need to break it into two pieces and kind of flip flop the order of how the project was going to be installed for a number of reasons. And I included a memo that we generated for the Park and Tree Commission or committee, excuse me, last month that kind of spelled that out, and that's in your packet. With that puts the restroom and kind of the city owner portion of the project elements front and center for this season, for this off season. And the biggest item in that is the restroom. And I had heard this from right when I got here. There was a desire, to squeeze the budgets, find ways to make sure that there's a 2-stall bathroom. Was very important and was advocated regularly. And I think staff concurs that with all that goes on there, that makes sense. And also adding a second bathroom to a single bathroom is quite challenging and costly. It's not very efficient to add another one later. So if we're going to do two, now is the time to do it. What the request in front of council is, there are two things. There's kind of some design color issues, and as I've learned in my career as staff, we should not make color choices. That is for policy people. But so there's a recommendation from Park and Tree committee about the color palette, and Brian did a lot of work with them to narrow it down and figure out what we could and couldn't do with the manufacturer. But the second piece of the request is the dollar part of it is to authorize city administrator to purchase this specific bathroom. It's a prefabricated structure, and the reason we've jumped it up right now onto this council meeting is it's got a 180-day order period. So we're looking to, with council concurrence and agreement, to get that ordered right away. So Public Works can go and do the septic tank, the earthwork, everything to get it prepped, and then that building lands and we connect it up and go. Remarkably, within like a day or two after it shows up is what Brian says. So I'll turn it over to Brian, but the only thing I'll add is I think Brian did a great job of sourcing. This was a challenging one to source and figure out stick built versus prefab, and the costs initially on prefabs were really spendy. And also what kind of procurement method could we do, finding it on a state bid. So I think this one is props to Brian for getting us to this spot with this particular product. So I'll turn it over to Brian for whatever I've missed.
He again has hit most of the highlights.
It's the benefit of going first.
Yeah. Like Adam explained, separating out the city-owned facilities for installations and putting off the bid was a huge weight lifted off Public Works' shoulders, because we were really having a hard time trying to figure out how to put that square peg in a round hole. Just things were not fitting together. So with this, the way that we've kind of mapped things out, this has bought us quite a bit of time, knowing that yes, the cost of construction may go up over the next 12 months, but what we were looking at was pretty much minimal construction. It really is just the time costs. Right. So plantings are probably not going to go through the roof like, a building would. Right. So moving this forward and putting that off a little bit is the most prudent thing. Does anybody have any questions?
This allows us, and Councilor Lehman, I'll then get back to you. This allows us to put all of the infrastructure in first, tear up the park, then sort of put it back together so it's usable for next summer.
That's correct.
And then when all of the festival season and the summer season is over, then to really do all of the other pretty things,
right,
if you will, the more fluffy things.
What and what this does, and I don't know, maybe Adam did say this, but the things that we're doing on the upfront are two of the biggest things that the grant required, right? So we want to get those costs done and over with, right? And then it allows us with those high cost pieces of the project paid for, now we can really kind of hone in on donations, right? And how that looks. We don't even have an idea of how we're going to move that ball forward, but we could really use donations to get the rest of the park, everything that we wanted in the park. Yes, sir.
I really support having nicer bathrooms than we have now, so that's. Support that. Does this include the demolition as well, or is that?
Demolition. So, okay, maybe I should frame this a little bit. These are new restrooms that are going in the
Right.
Pavilion Park. Yep. Yep.
Can we do the other ones too?
You find a person to donate the money, I'm pretty sure we can do anything you want.
So this will have an electronic system to lock and unlock it.
It's very possible. What we decided not to do was purchase their locking mechanisms, because we want to be able to do that with the other parks as well. So instead of paying the kind of the costs up there, we do have a vendor that has given us a quote. The more we get, the cheaper that quote may be. So we decided not to have the project pay for these two doors and do that at a later date.
That'll give us the ability for, one operating system.
Yep.
Really a phone, to be able to, set and do things with all door sets. We want them all under one, one ecosystem.
And would it be better to have just air dryer versus paper towels? You have to close them and fill up. Down here is paper towel dispensers.
Yeah, so we're not paying for the paper towel dispensers, but they've kind of taken that off because the city already has those type of utilities.
They don't have the air.
What we've seen, this was actually a conversation that we had about the air dryers. Vandalism, air dryers are the number one target to vandalism, right? Yep. So it's a lot cheaper for us to stick new paper towels in a paper towel dispenser than, to rewire a hand dryer.
So we're not demolishing, but we're gonna be responsible for bringing the sewer line up to this. And all the
Yep,
utilities up
that
to
is correct.
And that's part of that infrastructure that
Yep.
requires a lot of tearing up of our existing park.
We'll be able to do some of the electrical trenching. We won't do the electrical work ourselves, but we'll be able to prep that, the electrical pieces that have to go out. And obviously the septic tank itself that goes with this is a big item as well. And that's a little side internal bonus that we talk about, is that this is a new prototype that we're going to use in this facility of a septic tank that I think is really cool for us to try out.
Yeah, so our vendor that supplies our step sewer stuff is supplying us with the kind of the latest and greatest system. I believe it's 45, maybe even 50%.
Yeah, it's almost a
market.
2-for-1. Yeah.
Yep.
Sort of using us as a beta
Yep.
site.
That's what we actually talked to them about doing it at the operations center, and we were able to piggyback that deal onto this park. So, yeah.
Counselor Wells.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned construction of these bathrooms is a requirement of the grant. Yeah, okay, what was it? Because had it not been, is there a pressing need for a bathroom at Pavilion Park?
Well, I think from
Another way, Brian, not to interrupt, would we be better spending $118,000 in renovating the existing bathrooms? But if we have to do it because grant funds are contingent on it. That's one thing. Okay, all right, got it.
Yep.
Have to do it.
So that's what we kind of asked for the money for, right? Was
Okay.
for these amenities for, you know, ADA accessibility. There's the words are escaping me right now.
Yeah, there's-
Diversity, inclusion, and
Right.
so the grant was kind of designed around that getting people with disabilities to the park and be able to use it. So it's a lot closer to downtown, believe it or not, especially that restaurant corridor. We felt like putting that into the grant was just a good idea. And there's such high use in that park during concerts in the park and things like that. We feel like this is just a really good place for this. So that's why we did that.
I did notice, you know, concerts in the park last summer. Happened to be eating at Blue Valley Bistro just before the food trucks were open, but eating at Blue Valley Bistro. And lots of people were coming in and saying, is there a restaurant close by?
Yeah.
So, you know, I do, while it's a big ticket item, number one, we have to do it because of the grant, but number two, I think it probably is time to look at
Yeah.
4 restrooms in Coburg.
Where's it going?
So it'll go in the southeast corner of the Pavilion Park. So if you're standing in front of your building, kind of over to your right, back in the corner. So if you were standing, you know,
Kind of like the bike repair.
yeah, over kind of just south of the bike kiosk. Yep.
Well, the, male, female, or the unisex?
I believe they're gonna be unisex. Yep. So it won't matter.
And one of the other thoughts when we were looking at it through parks for designing that park when we first started to apply for the grant was the hope is that with the restaurants and whatever that are building was to originally, the idea is to add more tables over there so that people who are using the restaurants can take their food and go across the street to the park and eat and then not have to use
Across over again, yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
to kind of help encourage people to eat at the restaurants when they're really crowded and have an alternate place to sit. That's
Yeah, that's fair.
kind of a plaza kind of idea.
Great discussion. Always appreciate your insights and questions. At this point, I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept the color and exterior color recommendations of staff and members of the Parks and Tree Committee and authorize the city administrator to purchase the CXT Denali prefabrication restroom.
Have a motion by Counselor Smith. I hear a second. Yeah.
It was a race.
So there's a motion by Counselor Smith and a second by Counselor Lehman to accept the color and exterior color recommendations of staff and members of the Parks and Tree Committee and authorize the city administrator to purchase the CXT Denali prefabrications restroom. Any further discussion?
Does it have heaters in the?
No, it does not.
Have to bring your own. So fast.
The current ones we have now don't either, just so you know.
They're kind of chilly in there
Yep.
sometimes, Brian.
Yep.
And get out.
That's right. We don't want a lot of wasting.
No
time.
loitering.
All right, any other discussion? I can tell you that I've been to a few of the Parks and Tree Committee meetings and this has been well discussed. And I thank you, Brian, for working with them and we thank them for all of their input. People want this to be a real showstopper of a park. And I think that we'll put in the basics, we'll then see how much of that grant money that we have left, and then we'll figure out how to get the rest of it done.
Made more possible that we have the land swap with Shepherd.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's correct.
That's absolutely. Thank you for that input. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There's 4 in favor, any opposed? None. So motion carries 4-0. Thank you all. It's really exciting. I cannot wait to see what that looks like. Awesome. So now we have administrative information reports. And I believe that Chief Larson is going to give us the quarterly police department report. I'm always so amazed at how much our police officers do on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. Busy,
It is busy. There's always something.
there is.
So you have the report in front of you. It's similar to previous reports that we've done. You can see we have all 4 quarters, so it gives you a snapshot of the last year, all of the activity. We're glad to answer any question.
The one thing I'd like to point out, when we hear our neighbors and friends say, well, you know, there's never any police around and they aren't doing anything to keep calm the traffic down, you can point out that every month, or every quarter, where this is how many stops they're doing and how many, I think that this is really important that we as council members understand what our police department does and truly how busy they are.
It's a lot of traffic through.
There is a lot of traffic through this little town. Yes, there is. Any other questions? Oh, Councilor Lyman.
Oh, just to bring to council's attention that, as being on the city council, I'm the liaison to the police department, on the council. Just to let you know, Chief Larson and I are regular communications. Whenever there's issues that calls me and informs me things are happening that what I don't know is if I'm supposed to do anything with that other than be the representative for the council. Perhaps when there's issues that the chief wants to bring to the council, to that avenue, to have a position.
And Councilor Lehman sat in on one of our trials.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that, just to know how this part of the department works. Very interesting. You were on the jury pool as well as I was on the jury pool.
And they didn't choose us for jury. I just want to put that out there. Really surprised.
But the way that works is there were 25 of us that as the jury pool, and both the attorney for the defendant and the attorney for the city asked each juror questions. There was a questionnaire that each juror filled out in advance. We had that questionnaire about questions like, do you have any friend that is in the police department? Things that may qualify you or not qualify you. So they had those questions and they expanded on those questions. It started, I think, about 8:30 in the morning, and I stayed there till 5 o'clock that evening. And the jury still had not reached a verdict. There were 6 that were selected. What was very interesting is first 6 are drawn by a hat, and then they ask questions, and actually they already previously asked the questions. So they knew which ones they wanted and which ones they didn't. So one person went up there and the next person says, "You're excused." Don't get comfortable. And I think they excused about 5 or 6 until they got their final. And the process went very smoothly. Opening statements. Police officer that was involved was up on the stand and answered questions. And looked that up and he answered questions. Let the jury out. I think they were out for
else too.
I was-
Yeah. Mhm.
Asked a lot of good questions, wanted to come back and clarify the instructions to the jury, and the evidence and the video. It was very helpful that they had a video, body cameras that really showed exactly what happened. This particular case, the person was stopped because, originally, traffic stop, but then, he was unable to roll his window down completely, so you couldn't see him, which presented a danger, as you couldn't see what he was doing with his hands. Also very cooperative in terms of his name or address or valid driver's license, constantly talking on the phone, constantly smoking cigarettes, and a dog in the car that also posed a risk. As he said, this dog was very protective of me, afraid that if I get out of the car or if I'm arrested, trying to protect me, he was
Hopefully we don't
Safety.
need all of them. As
Very-
fascinating as it
Very good.
is. And one of the things that I didn't realize, and Counselor Lehman did, is that even though we weren't chosen as jurors, we could stay and be just sort of in the audience. And it was, I was here till about noon, a little after noon, and I was very impressed. I was impressed with the judge. I was impressed with our city attorney. It was a really very, very well done court, which, you just don't know. Luckily don't get to spend that much time in courtrooms. It was very
I will
interesting.
say though, I compliment our police force because it was a 58-minute stop, which took a lot of time. There was 3 police officers, I think a 4th one
State
responded
police,
as
yeah.
well. And, they bent over backwards to de-escalate this, and some departments would probably rush to distract the person and use force. There was a lot of patience and caring, to the point that, a police officer called this person's attorney to try to get a hold of him if he could help. And he also, wanted to call the veterans. Also, he was 100% disabled, PTSD. And so our police officers have
We can be very, very proud of them.
Well, thank you.
You can share that with all your officers. if you
I will.
wish, Chief.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
You can call me if you want to hear the end of my story.
Well, it was fascinating. Okay, we have a finance presentation tonight.
Yeah, this can be a little bit of a tag team with Greg and I. It's sort of in lieu of, and we'll talk about it, but in lieu of the quarterly report, we'll kind of touch on it. But yeah, we wanted to give somewhat of an update as to what we're doing in finance, what we're working on, what's the next things on the docket, and then I'll finish up the last back end of it with just kind of maybe it was more for me than from you all, but it was kind of just a setting the stage on what our funds are, what our major revenue streams and expenditures are, just at a very high level in each of our funds. So we'll just hit that for tonight, and hopefully, and we want to hear from you all as well.
And we don't have, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm just going, well, I don't think we have those in our packet, but then again, we could be missing some.
And it goes through current activities, steps, for, but yeah, us, our major. By that, using
questions. Efficient, accurate, and utilizing. Rather than meaningful. That said, again, we're not, well, better extra staff minus the department. Springbrook training, which and Springbrook does annual training. Really only do this again once a year. I can be in Las Vegas. But we did attend that. We learned some great things. That's some really good information. Definitely utilize. With that said, we can kind of just go through these slides that we have, and if anyone has any questions, just go ahead and go here. So we've also been working with and over things with me and help me order something. And work on something. So right here again, we're current activity accounts payable, streamlined. Again, this goes for both accounts payable and accounts receivable. We want to move everything much as we need all that for our software. Streamlined that paperwork. We've also working with Sarah. Her take on some extra responsibilities for who's fixed some of the things around. First reporting, and some of the stuff I'm going to mention multiple times next throughout this. Okay, so again, the overall idea. Okay, so first reporting, huge, really important process. So those reports dated and submitted in the website. A little bit more complex. I've never done it before, but around this little complexity. So you're updating that process, and this kind of ties into something that I just did here. Housing or payroll and whatnot. Really important to update that the way that we go about doing it. Audit, where we at with the audit for the home stretch. We're still got a few things that we kind of turn on the back here, but nothing. We plan to have it by the end of the calendar year. So we'll keep you updated on that. For any response from our auditors, any issues like that so far. The typical issues with auditors are their end, not ours. There are fewer auditors in the state than there used to be by a lot. And they're scrambling. So our job, really what we do is when we get anything from the auditors, one business day, we get it back because it needs to be back in their court, to meet the requirements. We don't foresee any need for, they haven't indicated any need on their end for an extension. Many cities are doing it. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with their books or their audit process. It just means that less auditors have more work to do and the audits are harder and harder. So, we still think we're on track as far as we see for having it in front of you in February, and having it submitted, at the end of the calendar year, which is the regular due date. Any questions about the audit? So monthly reconciliation process. Again, a really, really important piece of what I do here. And again, not that there is anything wrong with the way we're currently doing it, it works. But like I said, going to the next level, being efficient, utilizing the resources. Yeah, that includes this participation process, structuring it, organizing how we do it. Really, really, really important. Good process. Dealt with monthly, quarterly financial reports, templates. Again, I think for Adam and I, it's coming up with some first steps. People, staff, please feel free to always give us recommendations. Those reports, I think, over the next few months here, we're going to start to see those reports that we're going to talk to the council. A little bit different with the team. That doesn't mean it doesn't contain the info. Okay, next steps. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. What I know about utilizing electronic software equipment is that it allows us to query, and rather
Yeah.
than going through stacks of paper to try and figure out what's where, we can ask the computer and we can get that back in a timely manner. We still have the finance audit committee. We still have the external auditor. We still have lots of safety pieces in place. So I know that in the past, there have been some questions about, I won't say financial irregularities, but unease perhaps in this community in terms of how money was moved around. We don't want our community members to feel uneasy about this. We want them to know that there are many safeguards in place and that we are not ever trying to hide anything. We're trying to make it more transparent.
You're absolutely right. With this, using this software, that's exactly how it is that it eliminates is being it unaffected. So this first one here is a big one, and again, it ties back to our, I have said here, like to multiple reasons for that. I listed a few of them out here. The data entry, information with the general ledger, contract service expenses, albeit it's $3,500 and $3,500 back in here. Overall, more efficient pro operation. The other big, really quick wants us to use our cable generator. System.
And hers is by month. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Pay periods sometimes span 2 different months.
Hers month is very different. Squeeze it in there versus what our
And everyone has to fit PERS. PERS doesn't fit us. We fit PERS. That's that. It is a one-way street for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it really, again, it becomes very difficult.
Mhm.
The Nonetheless, putting payroll back in the house. Comes in, salary, everything else. Day, backside. Financial policy, accounting procedure update. Finance audit committee, we've been going through the policies. And doing a lot of grammatical changes to it, doing the policies. I think something that we noticed. Reviewing them in your office. Most likely to.
Yeah, there's a couple things that, the document actually lists out future sections that, that I think the committee wanted to get to and I think staff wanted to get to. So it's an evolving building a policy document. And part of it too is it's trying to be two things. It's a policy document and a operations procedures document. And procedures change very regularly. So what we'll bring to you at some point here in the future through the finance committee as well is probably busting that into two, having a real financial management policy document that is truly full policy, including some things that aren't in there now, ending fund balance targets for each fund, just really those high level policies that we have with internal controls, and we'll have our auditors review it. We've already talked to them about it to have that get into their work plan post after they get the audit done. But then also on the procedural side, the more day-to-day operations, those have a tendency to get old quick because we change procedures. Sometimes we're forced to by other regulatory things. And so those I think evolve much faster and they've gotten a little bit old. And I think some of those may or may not need to be approved at a resolution level, but we'll bring them all and we'll kind of propose how we structure it with new policy material and probably some sort of separation between the policy and the kind of the ops procedures.
Down the list there, capital improvements plan updates. Let's see, February.
Yeah. That's our goal, is to have that in the capital improvements plan in front of you. That's something that is a joint project of Greg, Brian and I, for the most part, to put together the updated, just an annual update to the CIP, get that adopted prior to the budget. That's actually then rolls in as kind of embedded into the budget based on your approval. So the goal there is a February, March timeline. So we get that done and approved and roll that into the proposed budget in March, April. So a project that actually is as heavy on Brian as it is the two of us. So.
Delegation methodology review. Streamlining that. That's it. Any questions on that, Harold? We put these on here just because we realized that other this from applications we're trying to. And their needs. Standard template, as we just, I got through this and listed out categories by fund, but pay, actual prior, fund balance summary. These are just some of the items we have on here. Then we're always looking. Month reports, management options, provide counsel. This will be a quick hit of where we're at, a little bit of narrative in it. Get that in the monthly packets. And then of course, the big report, quarterly reports.
Some of the, just real quick on the financial reports, part of what we also want to do in utilizing, leveraging and utilizing Springbrook more is to have that a little bit more automated where we're running using some pivot tables, using some cubes, some translation stuff to get it from the general ledger software into a report template efficiently, quickly. So once we land on what we land on, we'd like to kind of stay with it because we're building systems to roll that data from one to another. So we're not printing a report out of Springbrook and then keying in columns, on a separate spreadsheet and trying to make sure, did that balance? Do we have it? We want to connect it up, and there are tools both within Springbrook and then also obviously some Excel tools. Pivot tables are, once you set them up, you're getting a data pull and you have current data in there that is direct from the source. So that's a goal there. So, some of those, when we talk about them, we'll probably say, well, that one is a lot harder to do than another. So we might want to say, if you really, really want to do it, of course we'll do it. But we'll give some pointers about what stuff is, what we think is the most efficient way to data transfer. And then again, the monthlies, I think the intention is we really utilize them within the departments, looking at budget tracking, looking at expenditures. That's pretty essential for our leadership team. We'll provide them to council, but the idea being more of it's there as an FYI. You can always ask a question, but the quarterlies are the one that we'll spend a little bit more time looking at. That'll be the more of the graphs and chart kind of visual look rather than the monthly reports that are more columnar, percentage based, budget to actual, percent of the year, that kind of stuff for a quick reference of tracking. That's at least the intent. But again, that's when we bring the first round, that's just the first round and we can adjust. So am I up? I think we're at the spot where we're transitioning over, although I jumped in on much of those anyway. So jump in wherever you need to, Greg. So this was one that Greg mentioned earlier is that chart of accounts and general ledger review. Just a real quick reminder on the left side, those are the current funds, general fund, street fund, water and sewer funds. And then the general fund, of course, has a number of things that reside within it. Looking at what we bring, this would all happen on a fiscal year. We wouldn't do it during a fiscal year, but this would be something that we'll see if we can get to. Historically, I've seen, and I think there's benefit from separating out SDCs into their own funds. Those are restricted funds, so you typically don't want to commingle a restricted fund with unrestricted funds. You can still track it, and we do. It's tracked. It's able to be done. There's nothing wrong with the way it's structured. I think that's a kind of a financial preference that I have, is that it's actually in its own fund. It's very, as Mayor Bell said, when we're talking to the community and the questions from before, from Councilor Smith, you can say where the ins and outs of the SDC much more clearly when it's in its own fund, and you can carry them forward much easier. It I think saves a lot of confusion. And once you set up the funds, it's not tremendous difference to have, go from 4 to 8 or 4 to 9 funds, because they are very dedicated and restricted. And same thing for the proposal potentially for the storm drain fund. If we are going to look at a revenue stream that is dedicated to storm drain maintenance and infrastructure, you'd want to couple that with having its own fund, so you aren't collecting, money for storm drain and commingling it in, which has typically been done in many, many communities in streets. They're similar, but they're different. So having, again, dedicated funds, should be in their own, bucket.
At this point, do we have a storm drain fund?
We do not. No,
Okay,
we do not. So we spend some storm drain-ish money, in kind of out of streets right of way, to do some projects. I think, yeah, I think Council Lehman asked Brian about some of those last time. So we are doing a storm drain master plan, which will end up in the future. That's larger cities right now are regulated already in the storm drain infrastructure world. We're not yet, regulated, and we also.
Gutter.
Yeah, right. That's more. And then, where you exit to natural, where you have your outfalls and all of that is regulated. So we're on the low end of that, but I think we're probably at a spot where we should be, kind of contemplating being ready for that. So future discussions, but that was just an example of when you have dedicated funds, you should have a separate fund for them. And then the note down at the bottom is, the way the general fund revenues are, and this is maybe again a preference thing and something to discuss in the future, is how the revenues in the general fund are associated with departments rather than, just sitting there as their own revenues. And again, from a theory perspective, if they're the general fund by its nature, those are unrestricted funds. So they by law, don't go with a department. They don't go with a planning fee, doesn't go with a planning department. That is a general fund revenue. So if they aren't restricted externally, we should treat them as unrestricted as possible in how we record them in the general fund in our chart of accounts. Again, some structural changes that we plenty of to talk about later, but as we dig in further, I just can't help myself and start writing up lists. So this is a quick one, I think, and I'll go as quick or slow as you all want, because you may be well familiar. Like I said in the outset, this may have been more of an exercise for me than you all, but major revenue and expenses by fund, the general fund, it's one that when Ann's final meeting, she noted rightly that is the fund that we'll be needing to talk about the most, in the next year and future years, as we see expenses rising faster than the current revenue streams are allowed to rise, mostly by external forces. But just a tidbit to note on property taxes, I think that's a community, thing that is often not recognized. I think people are used to having property taxes are your general fund revenues. And if you look at that, it is, well under 50% of the revenues. Property taxes are by measure 5, measure 50, not keeping pace. So that's just a very clear indicator there when you have under $1 million out of 2.4 million revenues and under $1 million of its property tax. So that means that we're forced to come up with a diversified set of other revenue streams to make it work, or significantly cut the expense side. And there's just a smattering of the cost of the departments. This gets a little complicated because those cost allocations, we do allocate costs from. That's why the expenses are, almost a million more than the revenue, with the red asterisk that public works and admin costs, portions of those costs are allocated out to other funds, which is another item that we discussed earlier. It'd be worthy of a conversation with the current methodology. And
Information and can discuss this in greater depth at our retreat.
That too, and that's partly why I wanted to get this out now. We'll be able to, our first quarterly report that we provide you is going to be after the retreat, just by the way it falls. Yeah, this is kind of in my head is a precursor to our conversations in the retreat, which lead directly into budget conversations. So here's street fund, and I may have included more than was. I think once they say if you get below 30 font in in a PowerPoint, you're doing something wrong, but, it's a little small, but, of note is, I think, interesting to me, it is, a positive thing in the street fund is Coburg has, a good set of revenues, for streets and transportation. That's pretty impressive and it's, you know, on us to make sure we use it very well. And obviously grants play a large role in the capital, side of that. As well as loans, the tough, is, you know, is the payback mechanism for some transportation loans. And I didn't maybe do a great job of this, but in looking at the total fund balances, and then comparing that to the operations side is, you know, is relatively low. You know, all of these enterprise funds are typically heavy on capital projects, 2/3, 1/3, way, typically, just as a note. Water fund, you know, these get really easy to look at because there's very few revenue streams. It's charges for services and, you know, and then the expenses are general operations and then whatever, capital projects we can cobble together with grants and loans and other things. And that definitely, this fund is, you know, a high, you know, we'll be talking about this in 2 weeks, when we talk about the water system update.
Well, on the water fund, it'd be helpful to add those columns up, and I just did it quickly, and under the revenue side, there's 3 line items as 5,698. Under the expenses, 1,008,11.
Yeah, the red asterisk there, the capital project loans, that 4.5 million is our maximum. So really that conversation that we're gonna have, you know, in 2 weeks is about how much can and should we be drawing down of that 4.5 relative to, our ability to pay it back, over time. So, yeah, you know, it's, yeah, by design, not matched up, but we obviously will not be spending more on projects. But the hard part is getting into a lot of projects and having cost overruns when you can't really not finish them. So we have to be really careful. And I think, a lot of conversation, between Brian and I, about, what we need to be doing and what we're seeing with our water projects, specifically, which is really the impetus for that meeting, for having that work session on water systems.
So y'all can bring your leftover turkey.
Yeah.
How about pie and stuff? Okay.
Oh, there we
fine,
go,
we can have
yeah.
pie. I don't think anybody'd argue with that.
And then it's a good one to finish on is sewer, which is pretty simple and straightforward. The highlighted piece for me in looking at it is the debt service. That's a, you know, by design, that's a high number, but that's by design for the wastewater plant. And the urban renewal revenue, you know, that directly, goes to debt service, but the remainder is still significant. Brian and I just recently had some conversations about, you know, where things are looking on capital in the next 3 to 5 years, in wastewater and sewer. I think we're in pretty stable shape. This is probably in, you know, I shouldn't say that. So far so good. We've got some operational costs, you know, regular O&M that, has been a little challenging, pumps and small capital, costs, but the large capital infrastructure we don't foresee in the next few years. So we're pretty stable, just paying debt and keeping it up. And, as the groups that came in and toured the wastewater plant my first couple of weeks here, they all were amazed at how awesome that plant is. It's a really well-functioning, well-designed, well-operated plant, which does us well on it. It's hard to show it because all it means is that we are deferring on purpose projects that if we didn't manage it well and didn't operate it well would come earlier.
We talked about that previously about maintaining the membranes
Yep.
and keeping them, the cost of maintenance versus the cost of replacement. And,
Yep.
and I think, again, Public Works Brian and Burke's team do a fantastic job of really taking a lot of pride and ownership within that plan.
Yeah, the step system when I first got here was really a head scratcher because I hadn't been in a community with the step system. But it really does have some significant advantages at the plant. It's really cool.
Same question, probably the same answer. On the sewer fund, the revenues add up to less than expenses.
Yes, same issue that let's see, which one would that one be?
I think it's the debt service that's your big.
Right. I'll send, yeah, it does, but I'll, in the staff overhead, material services. Yeah, there's another source. I will send something out to you. I think I did miss one. That one doesn't have a nice, easy red asterisk next to it to explain it away. I will send council out something on that one to correct that slide. So that was the Whirlwind Finance Update.
I just wanted to make a comment that I'm really happy to see both of you enthusiastic about reviewing the finance processes. That's what I do for work, is I'm a finance person. And a lot of people shy away from that, but I really encourage us to review the processes. And one of the things that would worry me as a finance person for any organization is if they don't have their accounting processes documented. Because having been a supervisor for finance and accounting people, if somebody doesn't show up to work, you need to be able to do what they were doing. And the best way I feel to do that is to really document processes, even though you know they're going to change a lot and you kind of have to, go back and revisit it. I just really think that's vital. And I think we have an opportunity, it sounds like, with both of you being open to this, to really getting a good manual together that will provide a little more comfort that if somebody were to get sick for a little while and not be able to come in, that we still have a way of knowing what the person is doing.
Yep.
And be able to carry on.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Appreciate that you're looking at this with a fresh lens and looking for ways to streamline and then also document things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jumping into the deep end and paddling hard, huh? Okay, city administrator report.
Yeah, quickly go through the items and see if there's any questions. Pioneer Valley Estates, there's a letter at the back of this section of the packet that the mayor and I sent out, just trying to start a productive dialogue and hear we've heard from one member who knows a lot about the history, who is very invested in the topic. We haven't heard from anyone else. And there are, 30, depending upon what it seems to vacillate a little bit, 35 to 45 out there, households that we want to have an open house. And of course, council is invited to attend. It's not any solutions. It's designed to hear from them, hear what's concerning to them, have them hear a little bit about the challenges of that issue, which I think we've talked about. The issue is really, really aging distribution infrastructure that, well outside the city limits, kind of turmoil about the relationship over time, financially and legally. It's an interesting one. It's going to be a challenge to figure out, and the time to start it, I think, is now. It isn't an immediate solution at all, but this is hoping to crack that one open and see where we go from there.
I don't know about any of the rest of you, but when the representative from PVE, Pioneer Valley Estates, came, I'm sitting here going, okay, what I heard is he and I can only say he because he was the only one that was here, but the representation was that we were putting chunks of money away so that we could fix their infrastructure. And when I started looking at the files that we have, that's not the case. What they've been paying, and yes, they do pay more. Out of city limits does pay more for water than we do within city limits. But that wasn't even, that didn't allow enough to be putting money away for future needs. And that was sort of a real sinking feeling for me and thinking, you know, we've got to figure out a solution that will work for all of the parties involved. And I think as Adam just said, there have been so many that community started in the 60s, I believe. But the people that originally started that community, very few of them still live there. So all of the new people that come in, they just say, well, we just get our water and we get these exorbitant bills from Coburg, and, you know, they're not really questioning what happens when that infrastructure needs to be replaced. And it's my understanding that it is getting very close, that our public works department spends a lot of time out there putting Band-Aids on pipes to keep that system going. So we've got to make some tough decisions, and that community has to be involved.
There's some high level policy, you know, how we categorize that. You can make a case. We've devil's advocate each other, the mayor and I, a couple times about, well, yeah, you can look at it that way. Flip side, you can also look at it legitimately a different way. So there'll be some interesting conversations.
One of the things that might be helpful to research before that meeting is there's also the community on Bottom Loop, which is not very much further from the city limits than Pioneer Valley. And I know Pioneer Valley a long time ago, it's a handshake agreement that went bad and had a whole lot of.
That is my
everybody's
understanding.
opinion. But one of the other things maybe to look at is, since they are out of the city limits and we don't provide water or infrastructure to anybody else in our area that's outside the city limits. I know that the Bottom Loop area, my son lives out there, and they have water, but it's a water, it's not a co-op, but they all pay into a community well system. And their pay-in supports that community well system, whether they have county money that's a part of that or not. I don't think they do, but I think that in going forward, when we all look at the price that utilities cost us, even in the city, I guess I would like to see some thought given to helping them to find a community water system that ends our commitment to that.
Yes, and that is certainly one of the things that we'll have to put out to them. I believe from the research that I've done, there was a well that served that community to begin with. That well or those wells became contaminated. And that was when the county requested, and perhaps the state, that we be involved in providing them water. So it's an opportunity to sort of look forward as well as sort of acknowledging what happened.
Hopefully some of the agricultural processes have changed enough that hopefully that wouldn't be the same issue.
I think we're definitely, we'll get into all these details later. There are some state regulatory stuff that probably makes that not even possible anymore to go back to that. And where there's some ambiguity about the city's legal obligation to continue. So yeah, lots of dicey issues actually in this one that, you know, we may be looking at getting some outside legal counsel to help us sort that out. And do we have the ability to compel them to get their own district? I don't know that we do. So there's lots of, we're constrained by potential regulatory issues, you know, above and beyond us. But the time we at least want to get relationships started, dialogue started, and understand, you know, what is on their mind on their side of it. Yeah, that's the starter
That
kit.
already involved county commissioners, public works people, and so we're sort of trying to pull
Yep.
all those pieces together.
Yeah, and we talked to the regional solutions team. This is one of the 4 items with regional solutions that we talked about. And everybody had a head scratching like, well, this is an interesting one. It's really is unique because, our current land use laws would never allow that development to exist. It was the 60s before Senate Bill 100 and all of that. So, if we didn't have a million other things on our plate, I'd call it really fascinating, but we got a lot to do. So I'm not sure it's fascinating. So next one, we talked about this one, November 28th. That's 2 weeks from now, the water system update. That'll be Brian and I giving a kind of a rundown of where we are in water projects, what we think is next, what we need to be cognizant of, and what are some policy issues and decisions that we'll be needing to bring forward. Two relatively smaller ones out of that grouping will probably come back the very next council meeting, December 12th. But the big picture is much more than what will be on tap next month. Next one was just an FYI tidbit that I found interesting, and we shared at the leadership team of ODOT being very forthright with their funding issues and what they've decided to operationally do with operations and maintenance service levels. And that goes back to the general fund conversation or comment I made earlier, is that ultimately every community is looking at what are the actual service levels, what can you provide if you don't have any other revenues? What can you actually do? And how do you communicate it? So that was just a tidbit. And then I really wanted to highlight, and I won't go into any of that here, but we ended up having a month of, a lot of us went to different trainings. Several of us were able to, not go to Vegas. I stayed in Eugene, but it was really good stuff from everybody, and we heard good stuff all the way around. And I just, I think that's a critical. Training's critical for the organization, for individual development, for us collectively to get better and to help bring information to you all that's relevant and useful. So just a rundown of some of the trainings that we did this last 2 months. The last one is the recreational immunity. I think we may have talked about this one before. The CIS summary report I thought was a really good document that kind of kept it from getting too legalese and too, down in the weeds. It was just a really good summary of it. And page 5 is kind of the everyone's marching orders, but especially local government's marching orders to look at public recreational spaces. And that's something that Brian and I will look at and continue to work with CIS on for what does it mean to us locally. League of Oregon Cities is putting together some legislation that they'll try to get in the short session in February. That's not very likely. Short sessions usually don't have big meaty stuff like that. It's only 6 weeks long, but they may. I mean, it is the number one topic when I went to League of Oregon Cities. Everybody was clamoring about it because it's such a long-standing recreational immunity is just a bedrock. It's just a long-standing thing, and it just makes it makes sense to be able to even provide those recreational lands. So its dilution or destruction is a big deal. Probably a bigger deal to other communities than us, but we're not immune from it at all.
Does that affect our land swap or that land donation for the trail? Is that donation for the bike path?
Well, I would say that's probably more of a
over the
transportation
landscape?
system. It's not really a park. So you're there. So we don't have recreational immunity. We didn't before, and we still don't on that
Okay.
one. So
But
recreation.
it wouldn't impact the business that gave that piece of land directly?
That's why they donated. So that
They
liability's on
donated.
us.
Okay, well, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that liability is on us, and it wouldn't be recreational immunity. It wouldn't have come into play anyway. It was, recreational immunity is for things that aren't actual infrastructure systems. Right. Yeah. And this case was really accessing, are you recreating, on your way to the place? It's rough. The basic thing is there's no way to just put a stop and say, nope, recreational immunity. You have to actually qualify and define, and there's an argument to be made. And once there's an argument to be made, you're in court about whether it's whether they're recreating or not. So something we'll keep tabs with parks, with Park and Tree Committee and council as we move forward. I don't think it's massive, and I think it'll evolve as other entities with bigger resources help figure it out with us, for us. But in the short term, we need to be very wary. That's the part that concerns me the most, is this gap period, where there's no other replacement language.
What League of Oregon Cities would like is the legislature to sort of put a law in effect to protect the recreational.
Yeah, to somehow fill that hole back up, that crack that just got opened up, to whether it's the exact same or probably can't be, but some other mechanism to do the equivalent.
Yeah, lots of things to scratch heads about and think about. As we were talking about revenue streams and looking at property taxes, and Adam mentioned Measure 50 and the property tax limitations, I have to be honest and tell you, I really didn't ever quite understand. And I still don't quite understand what Measure 50 did. But I got a sampling of it when I went to the Oregon Mayors Association meeting in August, and went to a presentation, and I just sat there with my mouth open. So you could have two identical homes on the same street in a city, and one is paying almost double the taxes of the second. See, you all understand this. I didn't get it at all. It depends on how many times that a property is sold, and each time it's sold, there is a new assessment, and it so, live in your house forever. That's the bottom line, because you'll keep your taxes low. I mean, there is some adjustment upwards, but there is that limitation on it, and I think,
50%.
yeah.
50%, yeah.
And it's just,
It doesn't matter if you sold the house or not, the
Right.
assessed value doesn't.
right, but if that house has sold, those
They bring
taxes
it up.
will be higher, because,
That's not as of Measure 5, that's not true.
well, that's,
That's not, no, they
there
can't
is a
do that.
cap, but it does go up because it
understand.
is reassessed.
There's a schedule for reassessment.
Yeah.
I'll get it's a,
This may
new, but
this
that-
may
no.
be a topic of conversation in the retreat. We may get somebody into it. Because I'll tell you, I didn't quite get it either, and I still don't think I do, but I was totally like gobsmacked, to use a British term. It was,
I know for historic homes, it's set when you
Right.
get that classification, if you resell, then they bring it up to the current level and freeze
Right.
it again. For a
that
historic
was
home.
my understanding too.
But
They
it has
do
to have
bring it up.
historic home designation, and they're frozen, because when we had ours, the historic home, the taxes were frozen once it was declared a historic home, and then it stayed in place for 15 years or until we sold. And when we sold, then they brought that property tax up for that historic home, but then their advantage is it's frozen for another 15.
Right. And I think
yeah, that's for homes that are on the state register,
Historic
individually
register.
listed on the state register, state historic register, which has it's an incentive to restore historic homes. It's a tax abatement for a time, and you have to do certain things. You have to open it once a year. You have to do things to get it, but
And the only way that would change is with a change in the Oregon Constitution.
and League of Oregon Cities is talking about something not even at
But
the
that's-
session after the next, I mean, in the next 5 to 7 years, there's a lot of conversation about, sales tax, property tax, because every city, you read the budget message from
Yes.
any city in Oregon, the general fund, cliff, is 1 to 4 years off, just depending upon where a city is in its progression.
Any counselor input? Yeah, Counselor Lehman.
So just on page 90 for a second. Just a clarification, the miscellaneous, where it says locates 11, I'm assuming that's for the month. Oh, under work orders where it says 62, is that a running total or is that new ones for the month? Month.
That's what I thought, yeah, per month.
Okay, you said- And I'm assuming
really.
they don't always get done every month, so if that is for the month, then how many do we have outstanding?
Great questions. The 62, I don't think there's any that are, pending or open. I think them are all closed work orders.
The 62 would be closed.
Closed work orders for the month of October.
It doesn't represent what we have on running basis.
Right. There's always, stragglers because, you know, if, let's say, a sewer system goes into alarm the last day of the month, they'll leave that open or pending until it, so they'll look at it, create the work order, and then go back and make sure that the system is functioning properly. And then they'll close it out. So
And so these would be work orders across the street. the
Yep.
sewer.
all departments of public works. Yep, that's correct.
Shall the pool halls, huh?
Yep.
Okay, any other questions or council comments?
Our maintenance building progress.
Got some, yeah, we got some earth movement.
Get
Uh,
your steps in, Brian.
So the earthwork has been done. I think we just actually coded the first pay request. There probably won't be a lot of work done over the next few months. And that's because the buildings had to be ordered. We gotta put the concrete slab down, utilities, those sort of things. So probably won't get any real updates through, I'm guessing, maybe February.
Those things will be done over the next few months. Filed in the buildings.
It's possible this, I don't wanna to be honest with you, I don't wanna say.
So
'Cause
there's
if
a
I
lot
say
of
yes, then it'll be
infrastructure
no.
that needs to be
Yeah,
done.
there's a lot of work
Like the
left.
park. There's
Yep.
the infrastructure,
Yep,
then
yep.
there's the building.
Yep.
Okay.
It's really the same thing as the restroom is that the structure has to be ordered, built, assembled, brought out, the engineered thing. So it isn't essential to hurry up and do those other things because that thing's out till
Right.
April, May. So they'll do those as they fit them. Because you really work from that critical part when the building gets here is the critical part and you work backwards.
Lots of puzzle pieces.
Just gonna
So
stand there.
wait here real quick, just in case there's, is that
Anything
it?
else? Okay, well, everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much turkey and save pie to bring for the next council work session, which will be November 28th. But there's a lot of work being done. You can see at the future meetings. Upcoming, the Main Streets Agreement and franchise fee ordinances need to be relooked at soon. There's nothing else. I will adjourn the meeting and let's see, what time is it really? It is, must be 8:12. Okay, the meeting is adjourned.